It's the Shoal Weekly Podcast with Ben.
Hi, guys.
And Charlie.
Hello.
We're back again. Do be sure to follow our socials for updates and news. Hit that notification bell and please drop us a like and a follow. We really appreciate the support. If you have been following along on our socials this week, you'll know that today we're going to be talking about Blake Edwards' 1961 Breakfast at Tiffany's. And we have a special guest star today, Ethan Colburn from Cinefleck podcast. Ethan, how you doing?
Hello, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's our pleasure. Ethan, do you want to give the folks at home a little bit of information about who you are, where you are, and what your podcast is about?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ethan. I'm from California. I've been doing my podcast since July or so coming up on like 9 months. It's basically the concept is I have like a friend on every week. They pick one of their favorite movies and we pair that movie with a cocktail. We usually get kind of drunk and have a conversation about the movie. It's been really fun. I've had a great time with it. It's kind of something where I like to just drink and talk about movies with my friends anyways, so I might as well just like record it and put it out there. So yeah, that's kind of where it started, and it's kind of gained a following since then. So I'm happy to. I've been pretty pleased by it.
Well, we were really happy to reach out to you for that reason.
Yeah.
The same reason why we started. Well, Charlie started this podcast is that me and Charlie love talking about film all the time, and we thought, why don't we just record it and see where it goes? But
Totally.
Obviously, today we only felt it natural to keep up your tradition for you on the podcast. I know it's like 11 a.m. for you in California, but it is like 7:30 here in the UK. So we do have a couple of dubs. You always have
that's prime drinking time.
Why did you start the cocktail drinking on the show? Why did you feel it was like you wanted to match a cocktail to the movie you were watching?
Well, so I bartended like briefly like before the pandemic. So I've like some experience making drinks. I'm not really like properly trained, but like I was officially a bartender at a restaurant. So but that kind of gave me the idea, like, I mean, I think I was watching like Pinching with Babish as well, where like he was pairing food with different movies and like trying to recreate the foods. And I was like, I feel like we could come up with some, like fun cocktails. It's either like and so some of them end up being like super obvious. Like if I'm ever doing like The Big Lebowski, you have to do like White Russians with it. Or like some of them are just like obvious because they're in the movie. And some of them like kind of goes with it in spirit. And some of them it's just like my friends want to drink this and I'm just gonna put it out because this is what we want to have. So it's kind of a fun hook into the show, I guess. And then it just I guess it ended up like kind of paying our like main premise. If that makes sense.
Combination do you think has worked the best so far?
Oh, that's a good question. Like some of the original cocktails have been really fun. Like I had a bartender on who did On the Waterfront, and she's like a really good bartender. So she like did her own take on like a Manhattan called the Hoboken, which is where On the Waterfront is set. Sort of incorporated like Irish whiskey because there's Irish people there, and like she like did her own take on it, which is really, really cool. I've done a couple like original cocktails, which have been kind of fun to like put together ingredients.
We decided to go for the martini for Breakfast at Tiffany's, which is, of course, our film of the week for this week.
No, I totally feel a martini, yeah.
It was quite hard to get out to the shops during the pandemic, so I currently just have gin and tonic and cider, and I know Ben has some beer. Charlie, what are you drinking? You managed to get the ingredients.
Yeah, it's a gin martini I've got.
Gin martini.
Yeah, it definitely goes well with the movie.
Ethan, are you more of a gin martini or vodka?
I'm It depends. I think more of a vodka person, but like I've done this like elderflower martini where you put like a bit of like elderflower liquor in it, and that usually goes better with gin because gin's a little more like floral, like herby, I guess. Do I sound really
You said
pretentious right now?
elderflower, and Charlie got really excited.
Oh, elderflower gin. Oh.
Oh yeah, no, it's fantastic. You can only do elderflower with vodka, so.
Of course, we don't want to encourage a lot of drinking on the show, but
No.
I mean, there is something about.
I gotta put disclaimers on my podcast, honestly.
Yeah,
Start doing
I don't know.
that.
I mean, looking back at how we did in December, there was something about the night in which we all watched Pulp Fiction live, and we did a drinking
Such
game.
a good night.
It was a great night, and that was also the night that we decided that we wanted to invite Ben onto the podcast because he brought really good energy. I mean, granted, he was probably blindsided drunk, you know.
We all were.
Yeah,
That was good fun.
it was a great energy, and you know, it's nice to have a drink by my side and talk about films with a new guest. So yeah, thanks for bringing that dynamic to the podcast.
Absolutely. Happy I could bring it along.
He's not even had a drink and he's fumbling his words. that'll be us
true.
soon.
True. This is me sober, you guys.
11:30 for you right now, so in half an hour you could get away with a martini.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
peer pressure at you
it
or
like has to
anything,
be
but-
in the PM, I suppose, or the early AM.
You
But,
can tell you
yeah,
my
we'll
English.
We'll see how the afternoon
Yeah,
goes. No, just like funny story when like I was studying abroad in Paris, like the people there were all like telling me like the school was telling me like, oh, no one really binge drinks like Americans, like the Europeans, like they're really elegant about like the way they drink. And then I met all my British friends in Paris. I was like, oh no, like maybe the French do, but like the British like binge drink way more than us. I don't know what kind of bullshit they were telling us.
We're bad.
Well, I've
for
always
it.
said this, but you know, it's such a huge part of our social culture here in the UK.
Yeah,
That,
100%.
you know, in America, if you want to meet a friend, it's like, hey, let's meet at the salad bar, or let's go for a coffee, or or let's do something like
Hang on a second. Are you sure we're still talking about America?
Oh my god, let's go to the salad bar.
Maybe I spent too much time in Princeton. Who knows? Spent too much time around Ivy League rich people who just ate salad every day. But no, I remember my American friends saying to me, well, then what do you do if you're doing something social? And I just said, well, here's a text message from a few years ago to my friend Charlie that says pub ? At 11:30 in the morning. So
Sounds about
need I
right
say
for
more?
sure.
I mean, it's part of the uni experience, isn't it? As us, it's like right, night out, the morning after, pub.
Yeah.
9 a.m. when it
Perfect.
opens.
Go spoons for like a breakfast.
Exactly. Yeah. All
Yeah,
of one
100%.
breakfast, pudding first. Yeah. The whole shebang.
So
That's great.
obviously we're going to talk about breakfast at Tiffany's today, but usually, Ethan, on the show we have a bit of a catch up because we don't get a chance to talk between podcasts, and we like to know what else we've been watching apart from the film of the week. Charlie, why don't you start us off? What have you been watching this week?
So I watched under the recommendation from Josh, who plays guitar in the band, Quadrophenia, which is based around the Who album of
Yeah.
the same name. And because I'm a massive 1960s fan, but I didn't rate it. I really didn't rate it. There's just something off about it for me. But
Do you know what it was? What was off about it?
well, it all like goes up to this point where they have this fight on Brighton Beach, and I was like, oh, that's going to be the end of the film, and like that'll be like saying something about a generation, like, something like that, and it carried on afterwards, and I was like, just felt off. What have you been watching, Joe?
So I've been very busy this week. I've been moving house, between various other things, trying to also not neglect our social media pages as well. I think I forgot to post the weekly film this Monday, but I did manage to catch Return of the Jedi because we've just finished the Star Wars marathon that me and my house were doing. So that was fun. But obviously everyone knows Return of the Jedi. I'm not going to talk about that. But I did watch half, and I mean just half, of Braveheart because I was too busy to watch the second half.
Long movie.
I know. Well, what a great half of a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it in such a long time. It's incredibly historically inaccurate, but it's such a great film. Yeah, I think he gets a bad reputation for Braveheart, Mel Gibson, but
You should
I
do
think he does a
the
great job.
do the line in an accent, Joe.
What the famous line where he's
The
like,
famous line.
I am William Wallace. I don't shoot lightning bolts at my arse. They'll never take our lands. Yeah, I apologize profusely for
That's
that.
great.
I think that
love it.
first martini's gone to my head. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Ben, what have you been watching this week? I know you've had a pretty busy week yourself.
Yeah, pretty busy, but I did watch. Well, I tried to watch Breakfast Tiffany's the first time around, and it wasn't having it. We defaulted to Netflix, and we watched What Men Want, which is a comedy that's on there currently. And yeah, it was a bit of a good time. It's quite a basic principle. It's kind of a comedy, but it's got a this woman, the main character, basically has some drugs given to her by this fake psychic, and she starts hearing men's inner thoughts. It's quite a wacky concept, but it's quite funny. There's a lot of kind of stereotypes and just kind of it's good. It's a good film, good fun. If you don't want to take a film seriously, I would I'd recommend it. It's pretty good fun.
Yeah, so Mel Gibson made a movie called What Women Want. Which one came first, do you know?
That's a good question. Well, this came out last year. No, 2019. So
okay, so that was
I
like a
imagine
remake
it's-
because Mel Gibson
Yeah, I
one was
think
like
it's like a
99 or something.
Yeah, 2000. Yeah, it was. I think it's just the Switch side, the Switch side
Yeah,
of
for
that
sure.
premise, basically. Yeah, now you mentioned it, I remember that is a film. So, but yeah,
It's Mel Gibson's lucky day. We've mentioned him twice.
I don't actually know if he was
He'll be so
involved
grateful.
in the making of the second one. I'd be surprised if he was.
Probably not.
Yeah, no, I don't think he was. You never know these days. Most of the actors have like a production company these days, don't they? Like, and they're all
That's
involved
true.
in
That's true. They can easily
random
be
films
producing
and
it.
everything.
It says that Cameron Diaz was supposed to star in the lead of the loose sequel, but then it was released on Netflix instead. I don't know. I don't think Mel Gibson was connected to it at all. Probably not a bad thing. Mel Gibson's kind of gone weird of late in his older years.
Yeah, weird is an understatement.
He kind of falls into that same category of Tom Cruise. I really like Tom Cruise, and I think he gets a bad reputation. But Tom Cruise went so weird for about 10 years there.
And then Scientology happened.
So he's still pretty weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Ethan? What have you been watching?
I mean, going off like the 60s theme, I watched Monterey Pop, which is about like the Monterey Pop Festival. Just like a bunch of great live concerts. I saw like the Jimi Hendrix set from that too, which is just like iconic. They made that into a separate thing. The Who also played there, by the way.
Nice.
And like that's the one where they famously like smash the guitar and like smash all the drums and like
Is it,
security's coming on the stage. Like, should I stop them?
Is it the guy who did Don't Look Back? It's the same director, isn't it?
Yeah. It's D.A. Pennebaker is the filmmaker. So that was really fun. And by the way, I've actually seen the Who live, and they're like still fantastic.
wow.
It was like really fun. But and then I also saw Sound of Metal, which is another like kind of movie about music and all that. That was like my favorite of this week. Really, really good. In terms of like like other things I've seen this week, I did both Ratatouille and Up on the podcast, so those will be coming out like pretty soon. So I had to see the two of those. I saw Parallax View, which is like this kind of thriller from the 70s, which is really fun, and this sort of film noir Japanese one called Branded to Kill, which was little like not quite as good as I was expecting it to be, but still pretty fun. I think that's about it.
So just a few films then. Just a few.
Yeah, not many.
Honestly, that might not be it.
Yeah.
I need to check.
I think you've watched more films this week than Ben has. Like since he started the
That's an
podcast.
accomplishment. Yeah,
Yeah, I've watched
exactly.
like 2 things. I actually have a cool fact or trivia piece about the Who and their first American TV performance. I can't remember what show it is. I never remember what the show was, but
Was it Ed Sullivan?
yeah, probably. But if you watch the video of that, so you can just YouTube it. But basically, the drummer.
Is that the one that did blow the bass
Keith
drum up?
Moon.
Yeah, so the drummer.
Yeah.
So Keith Moon basically wanted to like pull this stunt, because that's what they were doing at the time, wasn't it? They were like smashing
Yeah.
guitars, like doing crazy stuff, and basically he was like, right, American TV, we're going to do something big. So basically, he went to the guy on set like, can we put some pyrotechnics in the drum, like, and when we sit in the set, I want you to blow the drum out. And basically, the guy was like, yeah, I'll put a little bit in. He was like, no, put more in. And he just like packed it full in. And basically, if you watch the video of it, the pyrotechnic goes, the drum blows up. He didn't tell any of the others about it. They're all like absolutely scared. And if you watch him, he like grabs his hand, and the drum actually like blew up on his hand, and he's actually like bleeding and wounded, and he's like crawling off the stage. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's
It's crazy.
insane.
That's also the one that I think Pete Townsend is still like half deaf from that explosion because he was like
Yeah.
right next to it.
'Cause it went off like right next to his ear. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
still
is
deaf
funny.
in one of his ears. Gosh, yeah, I think they were pretty pissed at him for a while. I'd be pissed.
It's pretty funny though.
It's
Yeah.
funny.
Who wouldn't be pissed?
Imagine
Just
One
be like,
Direction
"Nah, I'm
pulling that
okay."
these days.
One
I know,
Direction.
seriously. Like this is what like the kids were listening to, isn't it crazy? Like just better music.
Well, Ethan, again, it's great to have you on the podcast this week, and
Yeah.
it's nice to have a refreshing voice on the podcast. But we have a couple of questions for you, if you wouldn't mind answering them.
Yeah, 100%. That's why I'm here.
I mean, you kind of answered a couple of them in your introduction, sort of about why and how you started your podcast. But I think more of an interesting question I'd like to ask you is what kind of film or moment or experience made you like sort of fall in love with film and cinema in general, and why you thought it would be a good thing to talk about and broadcast?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was like a few moments over time for me. Like one of them is sort of an odd one, but like I was watching The Other Woman with Cameron Diaz. I don't know if you remember that movie.
Mhm.
It was really bad. I like really disliked it, and like I sat there with my girlfriend. I was just like, damn, like I wasted like 2 hours on like this dumb comedy with Cameron Diaz, and then I was just kind of like, I should start actually watching good movies, because like I could have seen Taxi Driver in this amount of time, and I still haven't seen Taxi Driver, so it was like,
Wow.
I was like, I kind of had this like existential crisis, like why am I wasting time watching like shitty Cameron Diaz comedies? So that happened, and then the other one that kind of like that. I mean, there's been a few films over time that have affected me. I think it was like a gradual thing that kind of got me to where I am with all of it. But the silent movie Metropolis by Fritz Lang is like a German silent movie.
Fantastic, yeah.
It's amazing, and like I saw that like in high school. I was just kind of looking up information about it. Like the stills looked really cool, and then like I found out like so much of it had been lost for so long, and like I was just it was kind of late at night on like a weekday, and I just kind of put it on my laptop, and I was just like, it blew my mind how something like that was like 90 years old could connect to me as much as it did. And so I think that's what really like drew me to dig more into like old movies and stuff, because I was just amazed how genuine and sort of and like how like the emotional beats of that movie still work so effectively. If that makes sense.
That's a really good answer. Metropolis is such an amazing film as well.
Totally.
So Ben really likes Avatar, and I just wanted to get your opinion on Avatar.
I knew this was going to happen.
I just watched Avatar like a couple months ago. I hadn't seen it since theaters. And I was expecting to not like it. I was honestly expecting to not like it, like because there was a pretty big Avatar backlash after it came out, so I was kind of like, it's gonna be kind of dumb and whatever. And it's a really cool movie. I wouldn't like say I love it, but I would say like, I mean, it feels like an 80s action movie with like 21st century technology, and like there's still nothing that looks quite like it. And in that sense, like I was really just impressed by like how immersive it all was.
I think Ben's very happy right now.
I think that pretty much summed up what we were talking about. It like,
Mm.
it has a special place in my heart just because I am all over that sci-fi stuff. But I managed to get these guys to admit that it was very immersive, so I'm happy that as a.
You never had to
professional
convince me it
opinion.
was immersive. I said it was immersive, but I'm sorry, but 5 stars on Letterboxd. Come on, Ben. Come on.
Don't judge me.
It's okay. We're not going to go back to that heated place. But yeah, thank you, Charlie, for stoking the fire there.
Yeah,
It was just
staring
about
at
to
the
We're
go
going to
out.
be talking about this in like 5 years' time. It'll still come up, even when they're on
Yeah.
Avatar like 3.
Yeah.
It's like, was the original one that good?
Exactly. I think that should be like your first question to every guest on this podcast.
How do you like Avatar?
How do you like Avatar?
Avatar, yes or no? Actually, I thought of a question on the spot when you were talking about your love for old films. If you could pick a decade that is your favorite decade for films, what would it be? I know it's a very hard question.
Oh, it's a good question. It's a solid question. It's I was thinking about this recently. It like for me, like I love like any time period that's just like there's just like a lot of change happening. You know, there's just like a lot of like creative, like because you know it happens at various points. Like think about like the mid '90s with like Tarantino and Paul Thomas Anderson, or like kind of like the late silent era was like just like people were doing crazy stuff with the camera. But like I think like the most kind of creative time. I mean, it's between the 60s and the 70s, and I just don't like. It's kind of a toss up because I mean, you look at the 70s, you look at like what was happening in America, and that was like definitely the best decade for Hollywood. But I mean, probably the best decade for foreign film was the 60s, and Hollywood was sort of influenced by that. So I have to be a toss up between those two. I don't really have a solid answer.
I was just about to say I think I'd sway more to the 70s, but then I just remembered that 2001: A Space Odyssey exists, and now I'm torn again.
There's like that whole new Hollywood period is like really rich with like amazing films. It's like an amazing time period.
Yeah, I mean, like I watched The Parallax View, which is, I mean, it should be like a basic action thriller, and they're just doing so much like creative stuff. Like they're just like the way they're choosing to edit it, and like the way like it's a lot less conventional than the kinds of movies that came like before or after the 70s in Hollywood. It's just like it's really like avant-garde for kind of like a studio thriller. And like that's just a lot of what you get was like that.
You obviously had like James Bond as well in the 1960s, which very popular
I love
here
Bond.
in the UK. Yeah. And
which is your favorite?
Oh,
my favorite Bond. Yeah. Probably From Russia with Love. Probably my favorite.
Yeah. Which one was that? Who was that with Bond?
That was the second one. That was with Connery.
Oh, okay.
No, honestly, maybe it's it's between that and On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I really love that one.
Mm-hmm.
The one with
really
Lazenby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great theme.
Yeah,
I mean, Lazenby is kind of a weak spot in the franchise, but I think everything around it works so well. Like Diana Rigg is amazing in it, and it's just like the whole Swiss like skiing chases, and it's really fun.
I don't want to say it, but On Her Majesty's Secret Service has such like sex appeal. It's just oozing sex appeal. Everything about it is just this is the most stylish a film can be.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I know, I feel that.
Yeah. And I don't think a Bond film has touched that level of sex appeal since. I mean, I'm
They've
really
almost
looking
been
forward
afraid
to
to.
the final Daniel Craig one, and that's
Yeah.
been delayed for a while now. But
In terms of sex appeal, I think the closest they got was like GoldenEye, maybe after that. Like the
I'd say maybe
Yeah.
sexiest
Casino
Bond.
Royale. Maybe got a bit
Casino
close.
Royale as well, yeah.
Casino
Yeah,
Is
Royale
Casino Royale
is,
sexy?
yeah.
Well, Eva Green, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, and they played up the whole like that like infamous, when he's like walking out
Mhm.
the water and he's got like like the
Yeah.
short speedos on, and he's just like strolling out the water, and then like the
That's
girls
like
going past
that's like
him.
the first time. That's like the first time in the franchise, like the camera's like thirsting after James Bond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's usually always zooming in and some like girls like random.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like,
So my girlfriend didn't think that Eva Green was sexy or had like no sex appeal, and I was like, "What
Oh
is wrong with her?"
God.
And she just said, "Well, she's too British. Her forehead is too big." Like,
First
you
of
know
all,
what?
she's French, so
Well, yeah. It was the accent, so
We're all
yeah, I
forgetting,
haven't let that go.
for sex appeal, I think Judi Dench in Skyfall,
all right, Charlie.
yeah,
No need
she
to
really
talk
brings
about
it.
your real. We don't need to get into kinks here. All right.
Let's keep it PG. Let's
Yeah.
And I know you've had a martini already, and you're working on your second one, but
That's it,
let's.
No, Eva Green was that Casino Royale for me. That was like, I don't know, but I always remember that in the front of my mind as being like kind of almost like the first time like a real pivotal character just like completely flips and betrays on like the other main character, and it was like one of the first films in that kind of like of that ilk that I watched, and I was like, it's still like kind of just a bit of nostalgia. It's like, oh, she did him dirty, and it's like every time I watch it, I'm just like waiting for that to happen. It's quite exciting.
Oh,
I think
when
it's
she
quite
Well, I mean,
drowns at the end, it's horrible.
heartbreak.
I can't watch that. Drowning is such a horrible way to go.
yeah, I mean that and Honor Majesty's Secret Service are like the two times that James Bond like kind of falls in love or like really wants to settle down with someone. So those are definitely like the most romantic. They have that in common. I just love the whole franchise. I mean, oh, you guys should see. I have like a massive Moonraker poster on my wall here. If you can see that.
Oh,
see
nice.
that?
Oh wow, yeah, that's
That's
amazing.
cool.
That's sick.
That's huge.
It's
That's
literally it's
massive.
so massive. It's so massive. I like don't know what I'm gonna do with it because it's like too big to frame at this point. Cost me like $1,000.
Wow.
It's hilarious.
Wow.
Well, I mean, you have to like it's like 6 feet, you know.
That's almost like framing me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, almost.
Well, no, I'd have to bend down a bit. I'm 6'3". Thank you very much.
There you go.
That poster's
Just
like
squeeze you
double
into that.
weight.
Well, Ethan, obviously, seeing as you're the guest on the show this week, we had to get you to pick the film of the week, and we posted it on our socials a week ago. Breakfast at Tiffany's. Obviously, you said you're torn between the 60s and 70s, but considering you chose this as the film of the week, I mean,
Might be a giveaway.
yeah, it might just be. I watched the film yesterday. Ben, I know he had trouble trying to watch it over the past few days. He just got around to watching the end today, so I'm glad he managed to catch that. But I mean, Ethan, why don't you start us off? Like, why do you love this film? Why did you recommend it?
I mean, I think it was so this is just a movie that like I've grown up like I've seen it countless times. Like I just had the DVD when I was a kid, and I don't know why I gravitated it. Like I don't know why I gravitated so much towards it as a kid. Like I just watch it on repeat, and there's something so kind of like I've always just been like a romantic, and there's something so romantic about just like they throw away their whole they both throw away their chance at getting rich, like so that they can be like in love together. And I think there's something so kind of beautiful about that. I think what's odd is like when I was a kid, I didn't pick up on like so much of like the subtext of that. I mean, she's not really like a prostitute, but she's like getting paid to sleep around with guys, and this like old lady's like cheating on her husband all the time and paying for his apartment so that she can like hook up with him there. And like there was so much subtext that I didn't really pick up on as a kid. So of all the movies I watched frequently, it's oddly changed the most for me, like from my like earlier years watching it. But it's it's just a classic. Like I've just loved the sort of vibe of the movie and the sort of free like New York 60s kind of aspect of it as well.
Yeah, for sure.
I must say it's one of the party scene when they're in Audrey Hepburn's apartment. I really wanted to be at that party. Like,
no, seriously,
such a good party scene.
Yeah, totally. I put this in my notes because I'm like, usually like parties and movies don't really do it for me. Sort of like this looks like that party looks so fun. Like I it looks so fun. I love the woman crying in front of the mirror and like all these like crazy drug. It looks insane.
That's always Charlie.
Yeah.
That's always Charlie at a party.
cry in front of a mirror.
Luckily, I haven't got a mirror in my room, so we're all right tonight.
My 21st birthday, my
drink too
21st
much.
birthday party, we were having such a great time, and then we go into my room, and Charlie's like, "Oh, let's stick the end on by the Doors on vinyl," and we stick it on. Charlie just lies on my floor for 11 minutes listening to it, almost like breaks down in tears.
I had that moment literally 2 nights ago. You guys don't even know. Like I just threw it on like, and I just lied in my bed with headphones, and I was like, it's a weird experience.
I mean, arguably one of the greatest songs ever written. Really.
Yeah, 100%. I love the Doors.
I could go that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, have you heard "The End" by the Doors?
I don't think I have. I'll have to,
Once we finish this, down like 3 bottles of beer.
That's a
And
prerequisite. Just get absolutely steaming drunk, and before you listen to it.
But yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean about the party.
Yeah.
It's so many times in films when you see a party, you can just tell that the room is completely silent. They've added the music in post,
totally.
and no one's shouting over each other. But I get the sense that it was really like a student house party. Like I just want to get to the toilet, and I'm having to like say hi to everyone on the way. How you doing? Yeah. What are you studying this year? What course are you on? Oh, who do you live with? I don't give a shit. I want to go to the toilet and get another beer on the way back. So yeah, it was a great party.
Yeah, sorry. It's also it's also like the point where Blake Edwards kind of gets to show off some of his slapstick stuff, because he's the same guy that did the Pink Panthers and stuff. And so it's kind of a point where he gets to show off some of his like, some lady's hat catches on fire and someone happens to pour booze on her head, and so like he gets to set up these kind of Pink Panther-y like
timber
pokes in that. The timber thing's great too. Yeah.
One of my favorite moments was when he was on his all fours and someone was like sat on him like a stool, and he just lifts his foot up and puts his cigarette under it. That's amazing.
Yeah. I love that too.
It's class.
And the phone being in the suitcase as well.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic.
Yeah.
There was no. What was it in the? Was it at the party when he brings a copy of his book as a gift?
Yeah.
And she just puts it on the empty shelf, and she's like, "Doesn't it look so amazing?" As if to say that, like all of my, look at all my other books that I don't have. Doesn't it look so amazing? That was fantastic.
And if you don't want to date Audrey Hepburn by the end of it, then there's something wrong, because oh my god, she's so perfect in it.
She's so
great. You say that,
well,
but
I mean,
she kind of reminded me of if you've seen 500 Days of Summer.
Yes,
really reminded me. Yeah, that kind of lovable girl next door, but also if you fall in love with her, she will break your heart in 2 to 3 weeks kind of vibe.
If you want your heart broken by anyone, it's going to be Audrey Hepburn, isn't it?
I'd get my heart broken.
That's been by Judi Dench, Audrey Hepburn.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a pattern,
exactly.
Charlie.
Yeah.
Did you guys know that Marilyn Monroe was supposed to be the lead as Holly Golightly? But her Monroe's drama coach basically said that playing a call girl was not going to be good for her image, and I just find that fascinating because Monroe being this this definitive sex icon, this one of the most beautiful women that has ever existed, turning down a role because it was going to be bad for her image, in which someone came along and replaced her, and then went on to win Golden Globe and not win, but be nominated for an Academy Award and a Golden Globe simultaneously. And also the author of the original book as well.
Truman Capote, yeah.
Yeah, he wanted Monroe to be in the lead. He envisioned he saw her as Holly.
I can see it, to be fair.
Yeah.
I'm glad she isn't in it, but I can see it. I could see it working.
Yeah, I mean, you're in an interesting era for Monroe. It's like 2 years before she died, and she's she really was she'd gone through like drama school. She's like trying to like kind of distance herself from like the gentlemen prefer blondes kind of like ditzy dumb blonde stuff, but she's having trouble doing that because she's still doing movies like Some Like It Hot and stuff, and she's struggling with drug issues. I could see it. I wouldn't like. I think she'd have to like not play it like her Marilyn Monroe kind of caricature. Like I think she'd have to kind of like I've seen her act, and she's actually a great actress when she chooses to really like immerse herself in a character. And I feel like she'd have to try to become Holly politely. Like I think Audrey Hepburn genuinely like I start to see the character here and not her as much after a while, just because she really doesn't feel like the Audrey Hepburn that you know outside of this, if that makes sense.
I think it was quite a risky film, I think, for the 1960s, and especially with the the novel so openly spoke about kind of homosexuality and drug use and miscarriages and things like that, and essentially, I mean, Capote even described Holly as this kind of American geisha, and so I wish, if I could criticize the film in any way, I think I would have liked to have seen more of that. But I understand, for 1960s Hollywood, that would have been very difficult. And there's even as I understand in the book, there's even hints that that the main guy was homosexual, that he was struggling with his own sexuality, and his friendship with Holly that kind of helps him through that. And so I think I would have liked to have seen that. Maybe, God forbid, in this day and age, if there's ever a remake of the film, we'd probably see some more of that from the novel.
It's quite a daring film for its time, I suppose.
Yeah, had it been made 10 years later, it probably would have had all that. It's you're like starting to. I mean, this is the same year as Psycho too, which pushed the bounds of like what could be shown to American audiences, and then obviously with all like the foreign movies that came out of the 60s, they finally loosened up on like the Hollywood code. So it's ahead of its time, but at the same time, like so much changed in that decade that it would have been completely different.
Absolutely. Of course, the only elephant in the room of Breakfast at Tiffany's is Mickey Rooney's portrayal of the Japanese neighbor, Mr. Yuniyoshi.
Yeah,
which is just
I just try to ignore it. Like it's so hard.
Who allowed that? Who just said this is okay?
Like, why is like the story can work without that character really being there in a sense?
I suppose maybe it's part of that. It adds a bit of that slapstick, because it provides that element in the party, and it's like when she's drunk with him after like that whole weird thing with Doc, and it's like it kind of just provides that almost comedic relief, which is kind of horrendous to say because it's like a really stereotyped and quite twisted view. But I suppose it was the 60s, right? Like a lot was different then, and kind of public perception. There wasn't anything wrong with it. So
it was very John Wayne playing Genghis Khan.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it definitely fits. Like you just have to watch the film in the context of when it was shot, and it fits. I mean, obviously today, you wouldn't get anything like that. But yeah, it's just kind of one of those things, isn't it? Really, it's there.
I think at the time it was kind of like funny and offensive. I think it was still kind of a dated caricature for its time, but it was like it was funny that he was like playing a dated caricature. It was like hilarious that they got like Mickey Rooney to do this. And then now it's just like you just feel uncomfortable like laughing at it. So and also like it's just not, I mean, yeah, like the jokes to me just aren't that good. Like it's just not that funny in general, aside from it being extremely racist. So yeah, I understand to a lot of people why like they have more trouble with this movie just given that is in it.
If you can look past it, though, obviously it's a great movie.
There's so much else.
Yeah,
And you bring up a good point that it's sort of non-essential in so many ways.
yeah.
Politically as well, this was only 16 years after World War II. You know, that
Yeah.
you know, political opinions and just sort of social opinions towards Japanese people, especially in America, were probably still not as forgiving 15 years later. 15 years is not a long time in the grand scheme of things. So it probably was, as you say, at that time, yes, a dated caricature, but also put in there because people would find it funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Which is a shame looking back, but obviously times have changed now and it wouldn't be allowed today. But especially during, in 1961, people would have laughed their heads off at Mickey Rooney doing that.
Yeah, and I think exactly. I think they would have been aware it was like a dated caricature. I mean, and like if it were a caricature of like an Italian neighbor, no one would care now. It's just like people like they did do a lot of like caricature work, and just like now I think for good reason we just don't have really a tolerance for like racist caricatures. So yeah, it's just it's unfortunate it's in the movie. I mean, like you could edit it out of the movie, but he actually does serve as a plot device, so then like you'd miss things. So it's like I like yeah, it's there, it like happens, and then I'm like back to the movie that I want to see. So like yeah, it's that's
Yeah, it feels
unfortunate.
like an awkward intermission. It feels
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd also have if it was cut out of the movie, like I think I'd have a problem with that because it's contextual anyway. As long as you have a warning before the film, then like I don't.
Yeah, I
Obviously,
agree.
it's bad, but you can't edit history in that way. I don't think.
Yeah, exactly. I think
No, I agree.
yeah, I think it's with all movies, like they're created in that for culture at that time, and if you try and kind of take it out of its time, I think most films feel weird. It's like we were talking a couple of weeks ago about playing modern day like music in like a period set past or like something, and like you could do it, and we've seen examples, like Bridgerton and Crazy Rich Asians. We were talking about it for like
Great Gatsby.
yeah, is where it's done tastefully, and then on the other hand, where you see like Great Gatsby, where it's like, yikes, that's not so good. And I think, but I think it's the same argument. If you take a film out of its like kind of cultural context, like you said, Charlie, it I think you lose the magic of it, and it can become, I mean, it's still offensive. Like obviously looking back at it now, but I think when it was made, it probably wasn't so intended. It was just like, oh, this is a thing that's done, and we get laughs out of it, we get views out of it. So. It's there, you have to accept it's there, and you have to recognize it's there. But like you said, I think it would be wrong to take it out.
It's
yeah,
like basically,
yeah.
it's that kind of argument of what's better, awareness or censorship. And I would argue that once upon a time, censorship was much more effective when things like the internet didn't exist. But nowadays, censorship can also, it can bring up other issues. Like,
I agree.
I agree. Are you going, in this case, if you get rid of Mickey Rooney in his very sort of stereotypical racist caricature, yes, you're in terms of censorship, you're doing a service to not offend anyone, but also then you are disrupting this kind of piece of artwork that has been created in a time that is very different to ours now. Whereas awareness, I think, if you take recent streaming services, for example, Netflix had quite a bit of backlash because they edited something that was racist out of The Office. I can't remember what it was. It was either The Office or Community. One of those sitcoms.
Oh, I think it was Community, wasn't it?
Was it Community? Yeah.
Yeah, I think they took the episode down.
Yeah, they took an episode out. Whereas on the other hand, Disney have taken a different approach on Disney Plus, where they are presenting some of their older sort of 1940s, 1950s animated classics that do depict sort of, I wouldn't say racist, but definitely kind of stereotypical and old-fashioned, more sort of conservative depictions of characters and cultures. And instead of editing them, they've just put a warning at the start of the film, just saying, this film contains outdated presentations of cultures and characters, and I think that does more of a service to children than I think censorship, because censorship, you're just hiding it from children, whereas awareness is going to be much more of an effective tool to educate them.
Yeah.
No, that's true. That's true. Yeah, like I think that's a good point. And to clarify my point, I don't really I like never advocate for censorship. I'm like a big proponent of just like availability of art in general. I mean, yeah, I think like warnings in general aren't really a bad thing, because they can help someone if they think they're going to be triggered by something. But yeah, I mean, like in general, if you're seeing old movies, you do benefit a lot from seeing what was okay at the time, and like you learn a lot more from history that way. And then let alone that, just art is meant for the public, and I don't like the idea of like any corporation telling me what I can and can't see, because that can lead to other problems too. But yeah, I mean, I think in this case it's just an interesting idea of like, could this movie exist without him? And I think like it could if they like replaced his character with like a non-racist caricature, but in its current form, you couldn't really edit him.
Yeah, I agree. I was just going to move on and say about the introduction. Like the first shot is one of the best introductory shots in film. I love it. It sets the tone perfectly for the rest of the film.
I really liked it because there's not always in films. You sometimes never you never really get why it's called that film, and like I just like how straight out the guns it's like she's eating breakfast at Tiffany's. That's the name of the film. Like that's it. That's boom done. Like you don't have to wait like till the end of the film to like, oh, that's why they called it this. Like it's kind of. I just thought it was quite novel. It's like it's quite cool.
Oh, totally. And that's another thing I didn't pick up on when I was a kid, was this idea that she'd clearly like had a crazy night out and she'd spent the night at some other guy's apartment, so she had to walk back with her same clothes. Like when I was a kid, I was just like, wow, she gets dressed up pretty early in the morning. But like like there's all these implications that I just did not get as a kid, which is really interesting to revisit. Like I also didn't get that. I mean, snow flurries in New Orleans is clearly like cocaine deliveries, or whatever. Like there's all these things that just, it's got a lot of subtext, which is interesting to look at.
There's layers to it, isn't it? You can look at it as a simple love story, or you can really delve into it and understand something about society at the time, which is really interesting to look at.
I think the other thing that I had a completely, I'm sorry if I'm rambling too much. I think the other thing that I had like a completely different view on when I was a kid was when Doc comes back to visit her, and he's like, oh, I married her when she was going on 14 and whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, like he's like this old man that married a 14-year-old. Like I think when I was a kid, I saw it more as like, oh, maybe she should go back to her like past husband, but he doesn't seem like that good for her and whatever. And now I'm like, okay, he like married a child bride. Like she's not being like I used to think she was being kind of needy by asking Paul to come to the bus station with her, but I'm like, I don't trust this guy at all now. And then also like threatened to send her brother back to the army if she didn't come home with him, which is like dirty. Like I was just like, this guy's really messed up, and I didn't pick up on that when I was a kid.
There was also a line that that Frank says, not Frank, sorry, is it Fred? Frank, whatever the name he goes through the film. Paul.
Oh, yeah.
Guys,
Fred,
all those
baby.
names. Fred, baby. When Holly turns around and says, what do you think, that you own me? And he says, yes, that's exactly what I think. And I couldn't. That ruined his character for me. It was a shame. There was something about that when he said to the person that was writing his checks for him and sort of keeping him, that rich woman, kind of saying that it almost implied that he needed to be looked after, and that now he had found someone to look after and to own and to care for. And again, like I said before, really reminded me of that kind of 500 Days of Summer, that kind of character of this unlovable woman who, men come along and think that they can change this woman's mind or force her to fall in love. And to me, it's quite a problematic cliche that you see in a lot of romantic films. This idea that, a guy is going to come along and rescue you and own you.
It's true.
We looked at Crazy Rich Asians the other week, and there was none of that in there. And we really applauded the way that Crazy Rich Asians looked at a rom-com from the perspective of more culture as opposed to gender sort of stereotypes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think Hollywood has always had that problem.
Yeah, yeah.
You look at like screwball comedies, like that's the distillation of that. That's how it's like sort of started, I guess.
But it's
It would be
fascinating
very
how
interesting to see a remake.
Yeah, it would. It's fascinating how open he is about it here. He's like, "Yeah, I do own you," and I think I do think though that he has good intentions, and I think it's he phrases it really badly by like modern, like for like modern audiences. But I think essentially like he's kind of saying like we belong together, and he's saying it like I own you, which is not really a good thing to tell people. But I think I think his point is like, like that she thinks she doesn't need anyone to get along, and really like she like does need to rely on someone long term. But I mean, I don't see their romance as problematic as that line, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just sort of a miscalculated line, I suppose.
It's
wrongly placed.
It's weird. It's weird when he says it. Yeah.
I'm glad that it doesn't, like you say, sort of override their relationship.
Exactly. And then when he finishes his speech in that scene, it's more about telling her that she needs to kind of like wake up and realize that she kind of can't just like, yes, she's a free spirit, but at the same time, like you can't just kind of thrift your way through life constantly. You actually have to kind of to like she makes a lot of it like, oh, I have to marry rich and I have to marry this and that, and and it's like actually life does kind of suck a bit, and you just have to find like your like niche area, like the things that make you happy, the people that make you happy, which is kind of what he was getting at. And yeah, like you said, it's a bit dated now. I'm sure audiences at the time, it probably wouldn't really have resonated like in the same way it does now. It probably would have not been as big of a deal. But yeah, I think it's just when you put it in the context of like he's just trying to like he loves her obviously, and he's just trying to make her realize that he loves her and that she can actually be happy. It's quite nice. It's quite sweet.
Yeah. You call yourself a free spirit? A wild thing. Well, you built this cage yourself, and I love that speech.
I love how it's only just sort of clicked in my head now that her character is kind of summarized by the cat as well. Like the cat kind of embodies her character. This cat with no name, with no home, that just like you say, sort of thrifts its way through life. It really upset me that she threw the cat out of the taxi at the end of the film.
At that point, I hated her character so much.
I really hated her so much.
Yeah.
But again, it linked in well. Her throwing the cat out of the taxi really linked in well with his speech because he says you're only ever going to run into yourself. And her kind of chasing after the cat at the end was her kind of saying, yes, I'm chasing after myself, but for the better. And I really liked that. So yeah, it was horrible to see him neglect the cat so much, but it made sense at the end of the film and sort of reflecting on it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I just, it's also like peak crazy Holly Golightly when she's just like in an alley going cat, like cat. You're like, oh gosh, like she's she's a little crazy. Like
she's nuts.
I do, yeah, she's absolutely nuts. Like I do have my doubts that they're able to really last long term, but it's a beautiful moment. I don't know.
It's been great to have you with us, Ethan. We'd love to have you again if you're willing.
Yeah, I had a great time.
Yeah, thank you. If you want to follow Ethan's podcast, please do go and give him some love over on Twitter. That's at Cinefleck. And check out his podcast. We'd really appreciate it if you go and give him some love. Don't forget to subscribe to Shoal as well. Do go check out our socials. Keep up to date with our film of the week. Ethan, thanks again for joining us. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much. I had a great time, you guys.
Good. I'm glad. Next week, we're going to be talking about WandaVision because we are in anticipation of its season finale on Disney+. That's this Friday coming, so do be sure to stay tuned for that. This has been the Shoal Weekly Podcast, and thanks for listening.
Fred, baby.